Welcome back to Brave Ideas, where we chat with the leaders in commercial real estate to answer all questions, space as a service, and help office real estate reposition to meet the evolving demand from the future of work. If you're an investor, fund manager, developer, landlord, operator, property manager, agent, or broker, hit that subscribe button. And if you prefer to watch or join the newsletter, head over to braveideas.media. I'm your host, Caleb Parker, and I want to give a big thank you to the team here at Work.life for their brilliant podcast studio and hospitality. If you've been thinking about launching your own podcast, I highly recommend getting in touch with them, and we'll make sure to include a link to their website in the show notes below. My guest for this episode is my friend, Sophie Turnbull, recently promoted to Chief Revenue Officer at Orega, one of the UK's leading flex office brands. And joining me as co-host for this episode is Eyal Lasker, CEO of our headline sponsor, FlexSpace AI. Sophie brings nearly 2 decades of experience across the flex office industry. She started at the Instant Group in 2008, where she spent more than a decade working with operators and building deep relationships across the sector. Since then, she's gone on to hold senior roles at Work.life, Huckletree, and now Orega, giving her a unique perspective on how different brands operate, sell, retain customers, and build commercially sustainable flex businesses. In this episode, we get into the practical realities of what actually makes a flex location successful, from retention and revenue quality to brand positioning, pricing strategy, broker relationships, and why high occupancy means very little if it's the wrong occupancy. Sophie also shares why operators need to understand who their product is ready for, why not every customer is the right customer, and why sometimes the strongest commercial decisions is being confident enough to say, we may not be the right fit for you. We also talk about yield management, pipeline discipline, renewal conversations, and the role frontline teams play in capturing the customer intelligence that never shows up neatly in a spreadsheet, but often determines whether a customer stays, grows, or leaves. And we go deep on one of the most important themes this season, why flex is ultimately a people business. Not just because customers buy from people, but because the best operators invest in their teams, train them properly, and empower them to deliver the kind of experience that drives loyalty, retention, and long-term performance. Before we jump into the full conversation, here's a quick word from our headline sponsor. If you're a flex operator still juggling spreadsheets and manual rate sheets, stop. You don't need to be a wizard to outsmart the big guys. You just need FlexSpace AI. It's your AI-powered revenue team that never sleeps, optimizing prices, automating marketing, and filling your space while you focus on your members. No burnout, no guesswork, no what-if tabs at 2 a.m. With FlexSpace AI, your building works as smart as you do. Now head over to flexspace.ai/brave and start growing your revenue today. Now, without further ado, let's jump into this episode with Sophie. Welcome to Brave Ideas, Sophie.
Thanks for having me.
It's great to be here at Work.life again in this podcast studio with our greenery and all the aesthetics here. Thanks for being here and co-hosting.
Yeah, thank you.
So this season, one of our overarching themes is getting into the practicalities of running co-working service offices, making it profitable. And we're going to get to that in a moment. But we had some really good chats I want to bring into this because we met, 10, 12 years ago during your time at Instant, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So I started at Instant in 2008. So it's my 18th year in the industry.
And you were a teacher before that.
I was, primary school teacher.
In Mexico?
I taught in Mexico, I taught in Madrid, and then I taught here in England. So kind of a mix of different range of primary school through to secondary, and then started at reception and then gave up after a year, thought I couldn't do it anymore.
You speak Spanish?
Un poco.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
¿Cuántos palabras? Muchas palabras.
Muchas palabras.
I even said palabras wrong. So okay. Well, we'll move on past it. This is an English-speaking podcast, so
we'll stick with that.
Apologies. But no, when you were in Instant, I remember. I think we were at Bounce one time, and then it ended up going into this karaoke. And but those were the days, and I think those Instant days is what I want to bring into this conversation, because I didn't know this until just a few moments ago. But many relationships came out of the Instant family.
They did, yeah. So I think there's 3 or 4 marriages that came out of the Instant family. There's lots of really, really good friendships and solid, relationships that have come out, and actually working relationships as well. So it was a lovely culture to work, back in the day, and also across the world. So again, we met a lot out in America, and there's still relationships that, I've got with the American teams and people I met, back in 2008, 2009, 2010. And we've all grown up together, and it does feel a bit like a family when you look back at how, those relationships have evolved over time. And there's now some lovely little instant families with, children and relationships that have come from it. So we always thank Rob Hamilton for that, because he created an amazing culture.
And Rob, I mean, he's been a visionary in this industry for a long time, but he was paying for people's honeymoons.
Well, I mean, he always said if you got married, he contributed to some at some point, and it was always a bit of a joke. He'd always try and encourage relationships, and he'd want to do it. So, we had a couple of things that probably we shouldn't all share about certain bits, but he encouraged relationships and encouraged that to happen. So he was always very sort of proud of it.
That's pretty cool. Really awesome. Are you paying for people to get married at FlexSpace AI?
Maybe I should start doing that. It's awesome to hear about such a warm and family-oriented culture that you have over there.
No, he was a great leader. So it was lovely to work with. And to be fair, the rest of the team after he left were great too. But the culture definitely was slightly different. But you walked into a family, you definitely felt like you were part of something special.
Well, that's important. I like stories like that. And sorry, guys, we were going to leave out all the juicy gossip, but you'll have to talk to Sophie directly for that stuff. Since Instant, you've gone deep into the operations, sales, obviously, sales, but in the operator world. Yeah. And you've gone across a few different brands in the past several years in your career, and you're now at Orega. As you've gone from brand to brand, I think often in our industry, we all speak the same language, but we're all different in different ways. So what do you see from the different brands or the major differences across the industry?
I think it's interesting because when I was at Instant, I managed all these different brands, and I always said to myself, if I could go and work for one operator, who would it be? And actually I had a list of people, and not a long list, but a list of people I wanted to work for. And I think it's what it has been nice. And it does feel sometimes that I've jumped from, place to place, and I'll be very honest about that. It does feel like that sometimes, but the experience I've taken has been huge. And everybody actually operates with very similar processes, and we have to deliver the same outcomes, but it's just the way we deliver them. And so I've gone from, a real community vibe and led feel here at Work Life, which was unbelievable. And the way that they create culture and community was something that I had at Instant. So it was lovely to go there because it felt very similar. Same at Huckletree, community was a focus, but that was design led, and that was very much focused on sort of looking at more bigger kind of corporate clients and how do you go out and build those relationships. And now I've come to Orega, and actually I've brought both of those things to something that Orega did do, but potentially not as sort of prominent, and being able to bring that in there as well. But ultimately, the processes and the outcomes are the same. It's just the method of how you deliver them. So I feel very fortunate to have been in those different brands, because I can bring something different every time, but I'm also still learning. So the nice thing is every time I've moved through, I've actually still feel like I'm challenging myself and I'm moving forward, but also the brand is helping me kind of understand it slightly differently, because ultimately we are all delivering the same product. It's just different audiences and different, as I say, different ways of doing it.
So then is it fair to say that the foundational aspects of what makes a business successful is the same across the board? It's just how we deliver that, who we deliver it for?
I think so. Yeah. But I do think that there's different ways of executing those processes, and also the sort of hierarchy of priority. So, for some businesses like here, community and client are first. Others, it's very much a sort of, process driven revenue generator, not so much of a client first, but maybe revenue first. And so I think, that's also been quite interesting, because everyone sort of, has different priority lists, and how they execute them in those orders is also quite an interesting one, because I feel like everyone has a different way of doing that as well.
So I think that's a good segue into diving into some of the practical aspects of what makes a business or a location successful. If you had to optimize specifically for one of these, what I'm going to list here, and sacrifice maybe the others, which would you really put an emphasis on? Occupancy, community, retention, ancillary revenue, revenue quality?
I would say retention at the minute for me is possibly the one that we are focusing on the most, more so because, I think we're having conversations only yesterday and in other kind of, industry forums. Holding on and keeping client relationships is so important at the minute. But also I know that we're sitting on a goldmine of our existing clients, and actually they don't know enough about our product ourselves, let alone, all the other things that we can deliver for them. And they also have lots of requirements outside of their initial sort of home location, so to speak, that we're probably not tapping into. So at the minute, retention seems to be my key focus. focus around how well do we know our clients, what more could we do for them, getting the feedback from them as to how we could do better, and using that to, improve our services and the quality of what we deliver. But I think I wouldn't ever sacrifice any of them, but I think you can have the highest occupancy in the world, but it doesn't revenue generate. So, for me, it's about having the right occupancy. And I would probably at times rather have a slightly, smaller occupancy, but I'm still got the right clients in who are generating still good amounts of money, than having a full building that doesn't generate me any money and actually causes me more issues because the clients are more demanding, or they want more, they're paying less, and we can't necessarily deliver the service we want to. So as I say, I don't like sacrificing any of them. Occupancy is super important, but it has to be the right occupancy.
So how do you get the right occupancy?
So again, understanding your brand first and your product, and understanding who your audience are. And there's no point in me going out and trying to go for the same clients as, for example, Work Life Hit, because we offer such a different product. So we know that whilst I do, attract creative clients and those in the tech world, I don't have, the design potentially, or some of the amenities and facilities that they desire and require. However, I can try, but reality is our product is super successful with professional services, some of the corporates, those who are looking for multiple locations outside of London, those who, demand location and quality and potentially client facing over sort of a more home from home approach, a community style. We still do the events, we still have a community, but it's a slightly different way. So we target our audiences based on our product and our knowledge of who we are the right product for. And it's not about going out we're not for everybody. So we're happy to turn around sometimes and say, as much as I'd love to have you here, I don't think we're right for you. And there's multiple tours we do. And we say, where are you off to see next? And they tell us, and we say, I think you're going to be really happy there.
So this is something I've been trying to lean into and unpack in various conversations. And you're describing brand, right? Mm-hmm. It's basically what it boils down to. You understand who your customer, who you're serving, and you create your brand, you communicate your brand and who you're serving and the values that you believe in. Yeah. And ultimately you attract those people. When you say targeting, and to me, it implies outbound sort of sales. Does that also mean communicating that via the website and all of your brand assets?
Yeah. And I think, targeting may be the wrong word, maybe positioning is better. But I think the whole point is that, we are positioning ourselves as this type of product. We are, we know that you present premium quality serviced offices, and we don't have co-working for that reason. We don't want to go into that co-working area, because what our clients really like is that, they know everybody they're sharing their kitchen with. So we don't have this footfall of people coming through that they don't recognize and that they aren't happy to be around. Not saying they're not happy to be around, but they like, they're very precious, some of them, about the conversations they have in the breakout spaces and who the audience is and who's there. And a lot of our clients walk in and go, well, this is why we love your product, because we feel like it's almost a bit exclusive and it's only us that are here and it's only us who get to use these amenities. And so again, it's just how you position yourself and knowing that other brands are brilliant, but they're not, not us, but also we're not for everybody. So we're very happy to say, as I said before, you're a great brand, you're a great product, but maybe we aren't the right people to service you. There's someone down the road or someone around the corner who is better, but then there's others who are happier to be in our brand and the way that we deliver our services. But it is difficult because you want as many clients as you can. You want to fill your buildings up. But I think you've got to always be confident in your brand and know who you are, who you are right for.
I want to go back to the metrics that we talked about before: retention, occupancy, revenue, right? And we tried to have that discussion yesterday at Flex Tribes, but I want to kind of to double down on that, right? Occupancy is, usually a leading indicator, but sometimes it's not like the most important indicator. But when you think about retention, right, which is obviously important, the question there is, do you retain at all costs, right? Or do you let those who underpaying to naturally churn?
And I think, this is a case by case basis, because there are some clients who might underpay slightly, but actually are a brilliant client and they're lovely to have. They're, very easy to work with. They respect, they love the brand, they want to be part of you. They're part of the community and they're actually outside of their, office space, their ancillary revenue, the way they're part of the community is actually invaluable. But also you want people to really respect and understand and appreciate the value you deliver. So if there are people in there who are underpaying and don't appreciate it, then those are the ones you should be, willing to sort of have that conversation with and say, I'm not sure what we deliver now is right for you. And, this is what we think our value is. If you can't deliver that, then, we would have to let you go. But actually, we feel lucky. We were very rarely in those situations. But I do also think, you've got to have the approach that when you're doing the deal initially, you're doing that low deal, and you've got to be prepared that you might churn them in a year's time or 2 years' time. But if not, you've got to have those conversations and deliver the value throughout their lifetime of the contract, so that they actually, by the time it comes to renewal, they understand that the price you're putting in front of them is actually the right price.
In the service office world versus co-working, service office people usually sign a year contract, maybe 6 months, maybe longer, but usually a year is kind of like the average, right?
Yeah.
In the co-working world, often, and they can as well, but often it's month to month even. And so I hear a lot of our co-working colleagues say, and I kind of agree with, by having that monthly renewal, it puts more pressure on the team to deliver that value you're talking about. Whereas if somebody's on a year contract, maybe it's not as much pressure every day. Do you agree with that?
I do. I think on a monthly basis, it's very difficult. 4 weeks is not enough to, get that feedback from someone and make improvements. We know that if people are complaining about, certain things that need to be fixed, things can't change in a month, and you do need that time, but also that time for them to see the value and the time for them to appreciate that they've been listened to and that you've delivered. So I think monthly is challenging. But I think that if you can communicate that these things are happening on a monthly basis and that you've listened and you're communicating, and they can see that the changes are coming and they can see that you are developing that. It might not happen straight away, but they can see the steps towards it. Then it makes it easier. But I think it's all about that communication with the client, and instead of saying to them, I've heard you, you've been listened, we're now delivering, but ultimately, we need to do X, Y, and Z before that happens, and that's going to take me 3 months to do. But I do think it's hard on a monthly basis. And I think over a longer period of time, you can show more value. However, when you do go to a retention conversation, they normally only remember the last 3 months and they forget what's happened the 6 months prior. So we are now, constantly having conversations throughout that process, not leaving it to just a renewal, so that we are getting that feedback on a more regular basis rather than just at renewal stage, because it's very difficult at renewal stage to turn it around, ready for them to make a decision quite quickly on whether they're staying or going.
Yeah, I think on the flip side, it puts more pressure on the staff, on the team members on the month-to-month basis. But at the same time, that pressure also maybe inspires more attentive to detail and customer service on a daily basis. I'm not saying one way is better than the other, but it's an interesting.
I think it's a mix, right? Because also I think you need to absorb all that feedback, and you then need to sit down and say, okay, that one person had that feedback. Is it universal? Is it something we should action, or is it that specific to that person? And that, that's quite subjective. And that you have to do more regularly. And I think you need to keep hearing that feedback. So I actually think monthly, the constant feedback is really good. It's just whether or not you make these sort of like on the go decisions, or whether you do sit back and go, this is a bigger decision for the business, and this is actually fundamentally going to change it. And how many people does this affect, and how much value does it bring across the board? Because we all have our own opinions. You can't please everybody, and you've got to sometimes make a decision that you actually, things you do, it may not make everybody happy, but the majority will be happier, and that brings the extra value.
What are the high-level buckets of issues that you see when it comes to when you have the renewal conversations? What are like kind of the main topics that they bring up?
Facilities issues are always going to be something that people jump on. So air conditioning, heating, all the things that go on within the kitchen areas and the breakout spaces, AV. People will always like to, make their feelings known about those, and they have every right to do that. If I'm honest with you, those are really normally the only things that we come across. But we have in the past, obviously, service is important, in the way that my team deliver day to day is super important. And actually, getting the positive feedback as well as the negative feedback really helps at renewal. Price is always going to be the bone of contention. And I think we were talking about this again yesterday at Flex Tribes around, you've got to know also what your competition's doing. So I always say to my team, you've got to be super prepared. You've got to understand understand what the business that themselves have gone through over the last 12 months. So have there been any external factors that will encourage them to grow or potentially downsize? Have they have they faced any challenges? But equally, what is our competition doing? Because if we go in too high, then we're going to lose them. And so we've got to understand what the market's doing so that when we present our price, we are very confident that we're not outpricing ourselves in the market and encouraging them to go out and explore other options. And we want to encourage them sometimes to go out because it puts us in a really good position.
But do you encourage them to go out?
We do sometimes,
Really?
yeah. So sometimes when they say, I don't think this price is right, we'll say, please go and have a look, because we're very confident that our price actually is very good. I won't do it all the time, but in situations where I am super confident that our pricing is on point, that what we are delivering is not over market price, then why not? Because actually, the cost to move is sometimes more expensive just for a small discount versus what they've got.
And yesterday we talked about yield management, and we were talking about utilization. I was talking about retention strategies and the cost of churn. Then there's the cost of acquisition. Mm-hmm. We started off with the one question: what is yield management? So I want to put that question back to you.
I mean, look, it's many things. I mean, the way I look at it is, yield management is the way that we, manage our clients and the way that we get what we can from each client. And, we sit down regularly, going through our pricing strategy. We go through who our clients are. We go through what everyone's paying and what we think we can get to. And I think it's also about understanding who you want in the business and who you want to keep and retain, and then who you're willing to potentially consider as churn. But again, we talk about occupancy being important. It is important. So when you look and you review all of these, you've got to be confident that if you are going to churn, you've got people ready and waiting in the wings, because those void periods are precious and you can't have them for too long. And so it goes back to knowing your competition, knowing your client, knowing the industry. And you've got to know that and feel confident that that churning is the right thing because you have got someone ready to go, or there's an existing client who wants to move into that space. But I challenge my team daily when they come to me and say, I don't think we need this client anymore. I say, well, let's look at the bigger picture. So I feel yield management is very much, I call it a Tetris puzzle. You've got to look at it in lots of different ways, and you've got to have the movement and be able to feel confident in that movement, that you don't lose the revenue, but you're still doing the right thing for the client, but the right thing for the business, and finding that balance. Because if you just look at the numbers, it can be really dangerous, because it's outside of that as well. And you've got to know the data, you've got to know your competition, you've got to know what else the value that client brings, rather than just yielding based on revenue.
Well, is there ever a time where the numbers overrule maybe what you want to do for the client?
Sometimes, yeah. But again, you've got to sit down and work out, is that the right thing? And, again, and maybe this goes back personally to the way I sort of started at Instant, where we would always consult a client and really understand the way their behaviors are and why they're using the space. And I'll give an example. Recently, a client had a huge amount of space. They weren't utilizing it. They wanted to stay but not pay any more money. And we couldn't do that for them because they were already quite far under, our pricing. So I sat down and I said, can we have a conversation about the way you use the space? And we had a really good, constructive and strategic conversation about the fact that they're not using all the space. So why don't we downsize them into another office, or keep half their office and give half back? And we'll give them the access cards and the ability for the whole team to still always come in. But ultimately, we should see an improvement in utilization. They save the money. I get the rate I need, and we don't lose them. It's worked because actually we've worked together on it and we've had that strategic conversation, but I've listened and I've delivered another solution rather than just going for the money. Because if I'd just gone for the money, we would have churned them. And actually that wasn't the right thing to do. So I do think sometimes, you have to look at the money, but you also have to look at, is there another solution you could offer them that works for you and them? And now I've got them paying list price in a space that they wouldn't have done before, but it works for them and it works for me.
Yeah, and Alan Pepper yesterday in the session referenced the fact that data is important, but it's really the frontline team.
Yeah.
What do they know about the customer?
Yeah.
And it's their job to really understand, well, this customer here, we don't need this meeting room because it's underutilized. Well, actually, no, we have this customer over here because they use this meeting room once a month or a quarter or whatever.
Yeah, and we do. And I think sometimes people think we're a bit crazy because we go, no, we're actually building this for this person, or we're doing this for that. And look, we also don't do a lot of things that we should do for our clients. So there's lots of things we've learned along the way. But the frontline team is, for me, possibly the most valuable thing. And I always say to my front of house team, you don't understand how important your role is. You're the first people you meet when the client comes in on a tour. You are the first bit of brand that they see and they experience, and that, service that they get. But you're also the one that is in the kitchen, cleaning up or, making sure everything's sorted. And you overhear a conversation and you know how happy they are or how unhappy they are. And you're that one who can then have a conversation with them. They open up, they talk to you, and you deliver all this information back to me. And that becomes really vital in the way we account manage those clients. And I think on the yield management point, you could just look at them as a number in an office. And if you just looked at it like that, you would never be successful. If you look at them as a business and how important they are to you as well and the value they bring to you, sometimes that value can outweigh some of the other revenue and sometimes it doesn't.
No, I get that. And I think the other piece that's really important for the front line is where you said they're the first experience of the brand for that client, but they're also the first line for that client's visitors as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
But how these conversations they hear in the kitchen, the intelligence that they have on all of the different clients, how do you get that into the business and to make decisions at head office?
So we're still working on that. So we are having, conversations regularly, and a lot of it is conversational. We're trying to find ways of how we can take that information, put it into a system or something so that we have it there.
I feel like this is crying out for like an LLM. I don't know why.
Is. Honestly, I feel like if you could create a CRM or a system that has everything in it, I think I could make a fortune. But yeah, it is. It's crying out for some kind of account management style base where, in the minute we've got spreadsheets and we've got decks and we've got, clients have files and things like that. And that's really old school and prehistoric, but sometimes it's the only way just to get the information down on paper. But my sales teams have meetings with our center teams regularly, and we kind of all get together and we have conversations about, okay, what's working, what's not, who's at risk, what have clients said. We obviously have our NPS and we have those customer feedback things, but actually not everyone does those. And it's those little nuggets of information that you get in the lift, in the corridor, in the kitchen that you do have to bring in, and you have to kind of note down somewhere. But there's not one good place I can find it yet. And it is difficult because not everyone shares it, and you forget how much people store in their brain versus how many things we actually put down on paper and use in that decision making.
So on the demand side, right? So we talked about how important it is to know how many deals or leads you have in the pipeline, right? Mm-hmm. Because that will really inform those pricing discussions and understanding who do you want to churn and so forth. How often or how frequent do you look at the pipeline, and how do you nurture the pipeline?
So I might be a little bit anal with this, but I look at it daily. More so because I just like to see how many leads have come in and how many tours we've done. Again, I manage our central sales team, so that daily kind of KPIs are vital for us to make sure we're maximizing every lead that comes through. Pipeline wise, I speak to my team weekly. We go through the pipeline. We have Power BI reports that I can tap into at any point throughout the day or the month or that I can see where everything is and at what stage they all are. But we get together as a team, a senior team, monthly and quarterly to review pricing strategy, what's going on within the buildings, any problems we've got. And then weekly, we also meet up to discuss if there's anything urgent and pressing that needs to be sorted, immediately. But the nurturing of the pipeline, really, without giving all of my tips away, we really look at each one and go, right, if it's currently sitting as a cold, warm or hot, what do I need to do to get it from cold to warm? What do I need to do to get it from warm to hot? What's stopping them signing now it's hot? Why are we still in this position where it's been hot for the X amount of weeks? So really understanding what are the blockers and what are we not doing, or what is the client needing before they can make a decision. So it's asking those questions. You've got a board meeting. What do you need for the board meeting to help speed up this decision? It's asking those kind of questions to the client, but also to my team to ensure that we know what's stopping us from developing and nurturing that, that lead or that deal through to fruition. And we don't always have the answers and we can't always help, but that's the way we do it.
Well, on that note, considering you've been across a few different operator brands, your background at Instant, what would you say that most operators get wrong that they should improve on in this whole sales nurturing process?
I think it's the training and development that you give your sales team. So the more confident they are in their brand, the more they know their product, the more they know all of the kind of ins and outs of the facilities, the amenities, the IT, everything. If they know everything and they know it in detail, that actually helps them because they don't walk away going, I'm sorry, I can't help you with that, or I don't know how to deliver it. They're always very confident in what they do. I feel very lucky at Orega. Our sales team are very experienced, but they are very confident people, and they've spent a lot of time in knowing their brand and their product. And I think it's one of those things where I've always said, from a broker level to, qualification of leads sort of roles, the more you know, the more successful you are. So the more you educate yourself on everything, the more you'll be able to answer those questions. But if you don't educate yourself on the brand, the product, and what you can do, the competition, the industry, you won't be able to do that. So I think some operators don't give enough time to their own team on when they bring out a new product or they bring out a new process or a new way of delivering, they don't sit and educate them enough. And my team sometimes hate me because I'm going, right, here's another call. We're going to go through this in detail. But I'd rather we go through it and we have a big discussion about it and everyone asks all their questions, because that enables them to feel empowered to go out and be able to answer those questions. But I think it's the education piece. The more you know, the more successful you are.
And I guess that's the same thing for dealing with the brokers that are out there. So if your team is really confident and understands the product, when the broker calls and is discussing an opportunity, makes it more of a seamless conversation.
It really does. And also, even from my central sales team, if a 20-person lead comes in, but I've got a 10 and 8, I could knock that wall down. I could create 20 desks quite easily. It's knowing that where we can do things and where we can't. We have lots of conversations which are really boring for my sales team, but okay, where are the sprinklers? Where could you build a phone booth? Where can we build a meeting room in each office? Where are the places where if a client comes in and says, I'd like a meeting room here, we know that we can deliver that. Or rather than going away and saying, let me go and find out, we walk in with a plan and we say, right, if you want to build a meeting room, it can go here and it can go here. And they are all prepared. And it's that whole fail to prepare, prepare to fail thing. Preparation is super key to be able to enable them. So yeah, with the brokers as well, it's how well do the brokers know our product? And how well are we educating them? Are we giving them the right information? Have they seen our product? What do they've got a lot of people to know about. How do we keep it at the forefront of their mind without it being irrelevant information? So again, asking those questions, what do you need from me? What tools do you need from me? And being able to look at that all the time.
I think there's a layer of understanding the inventory, what can be done to move that around. But then there's the softer aspect of the brand. Going back to full circle of what we talked about earlier, I'm wondering if the more and more that our industry, each of us as operators, gets better at communicating our brand values, communicating through our brand assets, will we see more direct inquiries, more leads coming to us directly, reducing our cost of acquisition? Or are we always going to have most of our business coming through a broker channel?
I think, this is an interesting conversation, a topic that comes up regularly. I think for me, the direct acquisition is always important because they come to you because they want to come to you, and they come to you because they've seen you and they think that you're the right product for them. And that's always very important because, again, I really want I want people who want to be with me, not me having to always sell to them why I'm the right person. But equally, if the brokers are doing it the right way, then they can add so much value and help someone make the right decision that if I do invest in the brokers in the right way and they are the right brokers for us, that is also a very successful lead generation channel for me. So it's a bit of both. I mean, direct is always lovely because they want me and that's great. But equally, I will always invest in that broker channel for that reason, but only with the people who understand me and get me and want to work with us, because again, that's my job to make it a very easy process for the brokers to work with me. I need to deliver them the information, I need to pay them well, I need to communicate well. If I don't do that, then how am I expecting them to come and do the same thing with me? So we do have to almost be that role model to say, this is how I want you to work and this is what I need back. But I need them.
Well, and this might be a controversial question when it comes to pricing, and we know there's a cost to brokers. There's a cost to getting direct business because you've got to invest in the marketing and the brand aspect. But there's a variance between the two. Do you keep pricing parity across the board? Or maybe even I'll ask this generically, do you think the industry keeps pricing parity across the board? Or because of the increased cost going through brokers, does the end user customer end up paying more to go through a broker?
I think, well, for us, new business, it's, we keep our pricing the same. But when it comes to renewal and a broker needs a fee paid in a renewal, then unfortunately we are very transparent with the client and we'll say, I need to add their fee on because I hadn't budgeted that fee. We expected to have this conversation directly. I respect you want to use them and I respect if they've added the value. there's a payment due, but not if they come and say to me, I'd like to help keep them, and we've already started that conversation. I think, it's important. We always factor in our pricing that we have to pay a fee. So I don't give out a different price to a broker versus a direct. Can I discount better? Yes, I can, because I don't have to think about a fee, but I still have to think about an acquisition cost, but I have to think it's in a slightly different way. So you have to think about it as I say, think about it in the way that you're presenting it ultimately in the proposal, but the initial pricing that goes out is the same.
So then does that feed into when you're thinking about, okay, should this customer churn or not? You're looking at, okay, here's the cost of void. Mm-hmm. Here's what my demand looks like.
Acquisition cost as well.
But here's a new acquisition cost, a new customer. But in this case, if this customer renews, I'm going to renew them at a discount, or I'm going to have to pay a renewal commission or whatever. Are you factoring all that into that conversation?
Yeah. Okay. We are, yeah. We have to, because you have to think about what's the worst case scenario versus the best case scenario. Yep. And you've got to be prepared that, what you need to pay. But I do think not all operators are doing that. And I also do think that where they, again, this increased commission, we don't offer any increased commissions, because we're a management agreement business and the landlord, is ultimately supporting those costs and we have to justify them. And a lot of times I can't justify the need for an increased fee. But where I do see people going out with incentives and with increased fees all for the brokers. And actually I kind of go, well, you're not helping yourself because you're paying an increased fee sometimes on a lower rate that you would have got. So it's balancing that decision as to, do you want the higher rate or do you want the lead? Mm-hmm. And it's working out what's more important. And I don't think that's universal. I think there's a lot of people doing lots of different things. And I understand it because everyone's got a different building model. They've also got different occupancy. And they've got different, as I said before, the hierarchy of priorities. So I understand it, but again, it doesn't work for everybody. And I think it's hard from an operator perspective to sometimes go up then. You feel like you're against, talking to this client, you're against other competitors and you can't budge on price because you've done a really good job on your price, or you can't offer the broker the same incentive. But ultimately, it shouldn't matter. The client should make the decision based on what they want to do, not what on the incentive or the price that's put forward to them. But that is sometimes quite challenging, whereas directly, you don't have that issue. They still have other proposals, of course, but you don't have that third-party intermediary to sort of spur them into one direction or another. But look, being a broker myself, I understand the value and I think it's important that you demonstrate the value. But I also now see it from an operator perspective where there's got to be that balance. So I feel quite fortunate because I see both sides, but I do want to shake some of the brokers and go, you just need to do a little bit more. And I promise you'll get more. But, it's hard to do that.
Sophie, this has been great. It's clear that you've been in this game for such a long time and have so much to teach everyone. So if you could leave all of your competitors with one final advice, what would it be?
I actually think it's look after your people. I think if you can invest in your people and you give them enough time and the education that they need and the support they need, your brand, your product and everything will succeed and thrive. If you don't invest in your people, and I see this happen a lot with the competitors, is they don't listen to their people. They don't give them the opportunity, the progression, the training, that is ultimately where people fail, because the people are part of your brand. They're the ones, you buy from people, you don't buy because it's got the Orega brand on it. You buy because you like my salesperson, and ultimately the brand behind him and her and everything like that. So I do genuinely think people are really key to moving forward, and that investment in progression and then them understanding how successful you can be. And I feel lucky because I started at the bottom and now I feel very fortunate to be leading a big team at Orega. But that wasn't because, and I thank so many people along the way who have helped me and guided me and given me the time and taught me those things. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for them. So I do think we have to give it back. And I think not every operator does that. And I think that's a shame because this industry is pretty special and the people in it are very special too. And I think there's a lot of good talent. And when you see talent move on or you see talent leave the industry, I think that's a real shame because actually I think they probably could have had way more opportunity. So yeah, that would be my advice because I feel that's made me who I am and how successful successful is a funny word to put against me, but successful I've been because of those people. So I think that investment's really important.
Well, success is subjective, right? You compare yourself to your own self. I think spoken like a true professional, and it's poignant advice that we should all be looking at because while we are in the real estate business, we are mostly in the people business because without the people, we'd have no real estate business.
Yeah.
So thank you very much for taking the time to share.
Me.
Hey, Al, thanks for co-hosting. Thank you for tuning in. And until next time, take care of yourself.